Welcome to part 2 of chapter 8, where we get to focus this time on the rock cycle. This is brought to you by Mrs. Gabriel and textbook authors Freidland and Rick. So here are the goals for the next few minutes. You're going to describe the rock cycle by the time we're done, discuss the importance and relevance of the rock cycle in environmental science, explain how soil forms, and describe the characteristics of soil. This is some pretty intense stuff, so please feel free to pause as needed, repeat, and go over it again and again. So we've learned in previous chapters about cycles in environmental science. This is just a review of the nitrogen and carbon cycles, which you've studied in the past. You should get to know these. Pause, look at them, remind yourself of the steps that happen in each cycle. And then, of course, we have the water cycle. And here we have the sulfur cycle, and then the phosphorus cycle. But the one that we're going to focus on today is the rock cycle. The rock cycle is driven by tectonics, which you just learned about, and also by processes that happen on Earth's surface, such as weathering and erosion. We're going to examine the rocks and the minerals that provide soil for us and provide resources for everything that we use. So here's a picture of the rock cycle. There's going to be a couple in this slideshow that I show you, but I need you to really pay attention to the arrows and what happens at the arrows. So if you start from the top arrow under rock cycle, you'll see that erosion occurs. Okay, well, what's erosion coming from? So it looks like erosion comes from weathering. So weathering comes from which rocks? And you should note that weathering comes from the breakdown of igneous rocks, metamorphic rocks, and they don't have an arrow from there, but it also comes from the breakdown of other sedimentary rocks. And then anything that's weathered gets eroded, transported, deposited, and turns into a sedimentary rock. So you get the gist of it, and we'll take a look at some other ones. So if you look at this one, this is also figure 8.15 in your textbook. We're going to start with igneous, so go ahead and find where igneous is on this chart. What are some igneous rock types? Look at their texture. So we use granite for roads. Look where granite is. We use granite for building riprap, railroad ties, and we also use it as just crushed stone. How does it form? Follow your arrows. It forms from lava and magma. We have intrusive and extrusive igneous rock. How does tectonic activity change igneous rock? Well, follow your arrows. It can put igneous rock under heat and pressure. When it puts it under heat and pressure, what does igneous rock turn into? It can turn into a metamorphic rock. So look at metamorphic. What are our two different types of metamorphic rock in this example? We have our marble and our quartzite. We use marble for buildings. We even use it as a filler and, believe it or not, as a food additive. Marble, like limestone, because limestone turns into marble under heat and pressure. Marble weathers very easily, so I would never get marble floors, nor would I get marble countertops, because my lemon and lime juice will just destroy it. How does sedimentary rocks form? From other rocks. So what are some examples of seds? Sandstone and limestone. And we use a lot of these as aggregates in construction materials for roads and buildings. So diabase is a common igneous rock intrusion, which is also known as black granite. It's been used in famous government buildings. So those are just some examples of the rocks that are most common in the rock cycle for the three types of rocks. We'll just spend a moment looking at a couple rocks that I'm sure that you've heard of. This is an example of pyrite. Pyrite is an igneous rock mineral. We use it for its given name, which is starting sparks for fires. We also use it to help us find gold, as it usually forms in similar locations. It used to be an important ore for getting sulfur, way back when we needed to extract it. Pyrite cannot actually be used in our aggregates and our rocks and seds for roads and for buildings, because it oxidizes and causes damage to the foundation. As a matter of fact, we can't build roads on top of rock that has pyrite in it because it oxidizes and weathers, and then we're going to start getting sinkholes in our roads. We don't use lead in our pencils anymore. We use graphite. This is an example of graphite. It feels really soft and greasy. It's a soft igneous mineral. We mine it so that we can use it for pencil lead, for oils, and as lubricants. So we actually can spray graphite powder and dust into locks to get our lock work better with our keys, and we use it on a lot of our machines. Hopefully you'll see the pattern forming here. We mine for these, we mine for these. This is the upper top left picture is soapstone. Soapstone is a metamorphic rock, and it consists of talc and some other minerals like micas, chlorite, amphiboles, pyroxenes, carbonates. That's not in your textbook, but you should just get familiar with them and hear them. This is a soapstone. It's a soft, dense, very heat-resistant rock, and it has a high specific heat capacity. These properties make it really useful for architecture uses and for practical and artistic uses. So that's why we like to mine for metamorphic soapstone. In the lower corner to the right is slate. And we have a lot of slate here in Harford County. Slate is a foliated metamorphic rock. It's formed through the metamorphism or change from heat and pressure of shale. It comes from shale. It's a low-grade metamorphic rock. It splits into thin pieces, and this one probably looks like it's around 5 or 6 centimeters across. Before it metamorphoses under the surface of the earth, slate used to be shale. Shale was in watery environments. It varies in color. We can get red slate, blue slate. Actually, Harford County has some very famous blue and green slate, and that's from the different minerals that are found in it, but it's generally and most commonly gray. It's impervious to water. That means water can't go through it, and it splits in these long, smooth, flat planes. Slate has been used a lot as roofing material. It used to be used as a writing board or writing slate in schools. It's used on really good pool tables. It's very heavy, and as a decorative gardening stone. So we mine for it for lots of human uses. I can't possibly go over every single rock and mineral. I just love them all so much, though, and what we use them for. These are both pictures of halite, and you also refer to halite as salt. So what type of rock do you think it is? Igneous, sedimentary, or metamorphic? That's right, it's a sedimentary rock. And it's used mostly for road salting, which is to melt ice. You can tell that it's salt because the crystals on it are cubes. They're little cubes. Look at the cubes in it. If you actually have salt at home that you put on your dinner, you will see the little cubes if you look like under a little magnifying glass microscope, or even just hold it real close to your eyeballs. Alright, so think about each of these rock types, igneous, sedimentary, metamorphic. Which one does this group of images represent? That's right, sedimentary. How do these represent sedimentary rocks? Well, they're showing how a rock, it doesn't matter what kind, that big rock there could be an igneous, a metamorphic, or a sedimentary rock, but it's showing how it gets little cracks in it. And these cracks usually start from simple little changes in temperature, getting really cold at night, getting really hot during the day, and changes in temperature result in expansion and contraction of materials. So really hot rocks tend to expand. And these cracks can get water in them, plant roots in them, and the plant roots grow and they expand in size. And believe it or not, when plant roots have a little water in them and they're growing, their pressure is really strong. The roots crack the rock more until it finally breaks. This is a form of weathering. And eventually, the big pieces of rock get smaller by even more weathering. So if you pay attention to the next slide here, this is just an example of a parent rock. Doesn't matter what kind of rock it is, igneous, sedimentary, metamorphic, and it's going through different experiences of weathering. And in this case, these are classified as biological, chemical, and physical weathering. An example of chemical weathering can occur more when you think about caves. So chemical weathering can be demonstrated by the carbonic acid wearing away limestone in the rock. So that was all solid rock, and carbonic acid, which is just normal, it comes from carbon that mixes with water in the atmosphere when it rains, and when it goes through the ground, seeps through the ground, if there's limestone there, that acidic pH in the water reacts with limestone, kind of makes it fizzy, and this is a natural process. But it is also, remember, an example of chemical weathering. Some chemical weathering can occur as a result of human activities as well. For example, sulfur gets emitted into the atmosphere as a result of fossil fuel combustion, which combines the oxygen to form sulfur dioxide. That sulfur dioxide, look at the diagram, reacts with water vapor in the atmosphere and then forms sulfuric acid, which then causes acid precipitation, which is also called acid rain. So just pay attention to the diagram, and one of the side effects of acid rain, acid precipitation, is the damage to plants. They can't handle that much acid in their rainwater. And the diagram just helps you understand more about human impacts on the water cycle and making the water cycle more acidic. Weathering is also a part of the sedimentary process. It breaks rock, but then the rock gets carried away or moved. Eventually it all gets deposited somewhere, and this moving process of the materials movement is called erosion. Some erosion occurs naturally as a result of the effect of water, glaciers, wind, gravity. This is a picture of the Badlands of South Dakota, where erosion is occurring from wind and water. It occurs very rapidly here because the rock is very soft and it's easily weathered. This type of rock is, there's shales, clays, and even some really small-sized sandstones. And the materials in these shales and clays are very soft and weathered very, very easily. Harder rocks, such as some of your igneous and metamorphic rocks, are, because they're harder and because the minerals don't react with anything in the water or with the oxygen in the air, they take longer to weather and erode, and then you won't get what we're looking at here in this picture of the Badlands in South Dakota. These pictures show examples of erosion as a negative effect of humans improperly using the land. So we use the land wrong, we create more erosion. Erosion carves the land, and it's supposed to take a long time, and in natural processes it's no big deal. But when humans get involved and we abuse the land in wrong ways, we accelerate erosion processes. And as a result of that, we actually lose our soil, which is a very big deal. So human land use increases the rate of erosion. We have poor land use practices, which are shown in these pictures, such as deforestation, overgrazing, and unmanaged construction activities. This leads to the deposition of the eroded materials somewhere else. So the materials are being picked up and they're being moved somewhere else. This may cause more environmental problems. One of the big problems is that it strips our soils. We need our soil for agriculture and to maintain species richness, abundance, and especially for maintaining biodiversity, rich biodiversity. Soil provides ecosystem services, which you've learned about before. So ecosystem services that are shown in this picture, can you figure them out? What does soil do for the ecosystem? It filters contaminants of overload of nutrients in the form of water as it moves through the water cycle. It's a medium for plant growth, minerals and materials to grab onto. It provides habitat, which contributes to biodiversity, and it cycles materials. So there are 3 parts of the geologic cycle that you've just learned about: tectonics, rocks, and soil formation. And soil is a mix of geologic and organic components. It covers much of the Earth's surface, and much of the Earth's land surface, that is. So this is an image depicting soil formation over time. It's a mixture of organic and inorganic matter. That's what soil is, which comes from rock type below it. And it also comes from the organic matter above it. So it's a combination of whatever it's sitting on top of and whatever's falling on top of it and dying and decomposing. And formation of soil takes thousands of years, but it can only take a few weeks to completely wipe out or destroy. And you know why we need our soils. So this is a graphic that I put together from pages 222 to 223, because I just want you to think about making things like this on your own. This was how I organized all the paragraphs on those pages, and they were basically explaining and describing the effects of soil type. So there's 4, well, there's actually 5. There's 5 5 different factors in soil type, and those are the parent material, and whatever that parent material is, the rock below it, the topography, which is how steep the land is. Are there lots of hills, or is it very, very flat, or is it like mountainy, just like a mile to the west? The climate, humidity, and time, and organisms. So go ahead and pause this video and really take some time to read the notes that I put in each of the boxes about each of these factors that affect soil type. For example, if you look in the upper left-hand corner, it describes what parent material is, and then I go on to explain quartz sand and how quartz sand is really nutrient poor, and that it's also found all along the Atlantic coast of the United States. So go ahead and study this for a little while. Okay, I'm going to give you lots of information in this one. You definitely need to use it. So, as a review from the last slide, there are 5 factors that affect soil formation. Can you name them? If not, pause, go back and check. Alright, on to this one. So some soil types are really good for growing crops. Others are good for building a house or a road upon. And to make the best decisions for these human uses, we need to understand soil horizons and soil properties, which we've already spent a little bit of time on, but now we're looking at it a little more deeply. As I said, we're going to start revisiting a lot of material and learning it at a deeper level. The picture here is just an example of a soil type and its horizons or layers. This depends mostly on climate, vegetation, and parent material. That's what this picture depends on. So study this picture and learn about the horizons while I talk about them. And these are the horizons that are typical in most soils. Sometimes they're thicker, sometimes they barely exist, but you really need to know the order of the horizons. So we have the O for organic, A, B, C, and sometimes we have an E in there. So, as I said, O is for organic. This layer is mostly pronounced in forests and grasslands. A is the topsoil, where some mixing of O and B have occurred. Just study the picture. I'll walk you through it. Sometimes in acidic soils, we'll get an E. E stands for alluviation, and that's how you remember your E. So then you have to remember, what does alluviation mean? Well, it means leaching. So when E is present, it occurs above the B, and iron, aluminum, and dissolved oxygen acids from up top are transported through the soil and removed from E. And all this leachate then sits at the B horizon. B is the subsoil, and it's mostly minerals. If the soil has nutrients, they will be in the B horizon. C is the least weathered horizon and is most like parent rock. So look at the picture. How far do you have to dig typically to get to the C horizon? Over 1.4 meters. And let's try another one. If you're testing for soil nutrients, which horizon should you get your sample of soil from? That's right. You should get it from sample B if you're testing for nutrients. So then how far do you have to dig if you want to, like, approximately? That's right. About 0.4 meters deep. Okay, so the next slide I'm going to go over soil texture, which we've already spent some time on. Just follow those little dotted red lines, which show us what a total of 100% of a soil example ends up as loam. 40% sand, 40% sill, 20% clay. See me if you need me to help you remember how to read these. So yeah, you should definitely recognize this. The reason this texture triangle is important is because the texture determines the soil's porosity and ability to hold nutrients. The porosity of soil, or how quickly soil drains, is high in sand. So sand will dry out quickly. However, sandy soils are easy for roots to penetrate, which is advantageous for growing plants such as carrots and potatoes. Clay particles, on the other hand, pack together very, very tightly, unlike sand. So we have less pore space in the clay particles, and water and roots can't easily move through it, so it becomes waterlogged. What do you think is the best agricultural soil? That's right, a mixture of sand, silt, and clay. This texture promotes balanced water drainage and retention. But you do need to keep in mind that plants have adapted to their different soil types. And just to give you an idea of particle sizes again, we've looked at this before, but clay is really, really tiny. Remember that these units are in millimeters, and we're looking at not even 1 whole millimeter. Okay, this shows the porosity of soil textures. Sand takes the least amount of time for water to drain through. Therefore, it can dry out very, very quickly. Clay, on the other hand, holds all that water. So the water isn't able to drain, at all. But if the water has nutrients in it, they're not going anywhere. So which soil type will allow pollutants to move through it the fastest? That's right, sandy soils. Pollutants are going to move through sand very, very quickly. Which soil would be best for containing pollutants, holding them back, like those in a landfill, let's say? That's right, clay. It prevents leaching of soil contaminants into groundwater, which they put clay liners actually underneath most landfills. The times we run into a problem is when there's a crack or a hole that ends up in the clay liner. Then, what happens then? Well, the contaminants make it to the groundwater. Okay, now look at this chart, study it, copy it, whatever it takes, and remember the textures and how each one is most useful and most detrimental. So I just discussed all of these, but now we're just looking at them like aeration. I actually didn't discuss aeration. So sand, and it makes sense. If water can move so easily through sand, well, then air should be able to move so easily through sand as well. And workability just has to do with when you're digging with your little shovel to plant your vegetables and so forth. Okay, so soils high in clay may promote high cation exchange. So I know this is a big one, so pay attention, pause, and repeat if you need it. And high cation exchange is very good for plants. Although, if the clay is over 20% clay, it becomes waterlogged. And then the plants are deprived of the oxygen, and the cation exchange capacity, cation exchange, CEC, doesn't work. Another chemical property that's important is the base saturation. The measure of bases to acids is all we're talking about here. Minerals can weather into the soil as acidic minerals or as basic minerals. These are important, very important for plant nutrition, but they need to be balanced. So if you look at the picture to the right, fungi, bacteria, protozoans contribute to soil mixing and the breakdown of large materials, and they mix up the chemicals as well and allow the balance to occur. Snails and slugs eat plant roots. Most soil organisms are detritivores, you've learned about that in our ecology unit, which consume dead plant and animal tissues, and they recycle the nutrients. You learned about cycles, and you learned about ecology, so these terms should be familiar. Now we're just applying them from a different perspective. Last part, soil degradation. That's the loss of some or all of the ability of soils to support plant growth. What's the major cause of soil degradation? Yes, you are on a roll today. It is soil erosion, which occurs when topsoil is disturbed. So how does it get disturbed? Plowing, removing vegetation, building, developing, even livestock abuses the land it's on. Compacting, intense agriculture, intense irrigation, depleting the nutrients, applying pesticides, and the list goes on. We need to stop soil degradation. Okay, so we've learned about rocks and minerals, the rock cycle, and soils. Do you understand the relevance of all these concepts in environmental science? Because that was the point. It's not about just understanding the geology, but how it applies to environmental science. This is the end of the video lecture. I hope that you learned enough to shrink your footprint. Have a great day.